The study of human institutions is always a search for the most tolerable imperfections. Richard Allen Epstein, American legal scholar. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. For tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. We are having another weekend edition. Why am I doing this? If you didn't catch the show yesterday, I'm going to give it to you briefly. I'm getting my hours up to qualify for Rumble's creator program. I detailed this in yesterday's show, so you can go check it out and listen at the very beginning. I tell you all about it. But effectively, what I need to do is get 30 hours of streaming time in 30 days so that I can qualify. There's a few other criteria that I have to meet, but I can meet those. One I actually already have. I now have over 100 followers on Rumble, which was the stiffest criteria for me to try to accomplish because it was the least out of my control. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. And I currently have 20 hours. So we're at it again. Happy Easter to everyone who celebrates. Speaking of, since it is Easter, I do have a hard deadline of 9 a.m. So we're going to get into this and get right down to it. If you saw my tweet last night talking about this show, I actually said that I was going to dive into the Abrego Garcia issue and respond to Dave Smith's recent comments regarding mass deportation. And what I decided, because it's Easter, and I see Joe over here in the comments. He's like DL over here trying to trigger folks on Resurrection Day of a peaceful immigrant who exercised speech. I'm actually not. I'm going to try to take it easy on people because it's Easter, but more importantly, I'm going to attend church with my family. So I've got a hard deadline to meet. So with that in mind, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to push off the Abrego Garcia part, just because I want to focus on the libertarian aspect, respond to Dave Smith's comments and even some of his critics as well. And I think that portion I can do safely within a reasonable time on Easter Sunday. And then I will probably just go ahead and get into, use the Abrego Garcia to kind of cover more into it, cover that a little bit more thoroughly tomorrow when I do the bill review, and we'll walk through and talk about, like, Okay, what did some of the court documents say? Where are people getting it wrong? So on and so forth. So that's what's going on. We're gonna take it a little easy today, just to make sure that I get everything in by my time for my deadline. Plus, yesterday I went 2.5 hours, which was it was a lot. I was not expecting to go 2.5 hours. I was thinking closer to two, maybe a little bit under. And then I went overdid it, and that's a good thing because that means I can balance out today a little bit, given that it's Easter and whatnot. So I want to do this in three parts. I want to start with the LP platform, the Libertarian Party platform. Then I'm going to segue into responding to Dave's recent comments. And then I'm going to elaborate on why I think an Ellis Island style immigration is the best policy for libertarians. Now, if you're not a libertarian and you're watching, don't get dismayed and turn me off just yet. I think you're going to be interested in what I have to hear or what I have to say. That doesn't mean you'll agree, and that's cool. But if you don't listen, then I think you'll misunderstand what a lot of libertarians, how a lot of libertarians view immigration. So if you want to understand from a libertarian perspective, or at least one libertarian's perspective, but my view is shared by many, then I think it would be worthwhile to tune in. I think also some of the points that I make will be relevant to you as well. So that's what we're going to do. So let's start with the LP platform. And I'm not gonna what I'm not gonna do is go through every little, like letter and word that applies. I'm just gonna kind of make it. I'm trying to make this simple, right? And the reason I'm even using the LP platform is because it's the easiest place to point fellow Americans to when it comes to what's the libertarian position on immigration. Now, you might have your favorite book written by your favorite author, your favorite libertarian thinker. I find that to be far less useful when we're talking to our fellow Americans. Libertarians can argue about who is the best libertarian thinker, who has the best ideas on how we should, build our society and whatnot. And those are great conversations to have internally. But when we're talking about public policy, we have to start thinking about our fellow Americans. How do we communicate to them? What's going to make sense to them? What do they understand? You have to meet people where they are. So the idea of saying like, oh, you need to check out this book written by so and so or whatever, that's not going to work in the realm of politics. So we got to move past that. Whenever I talk about libertarian ideas, I try to do so as if my audience isn't libertarian and maybe doesn't even know what it is. But I also try to balance the fact that I know that some of you guys are libertarian. And so I try to balance not preaching too much to the choir, but at the same time, basically giving enough meat to both of you, the libertarians and the non-libertarians. So hopefully I'll do that today. Let me know in the comments, respond to me on social media, what have you. Now, I'm also using the LP platform because, unlike your favorite author, your favorite libertarian thinker who wrote a great book, the Libertarian Party platform is the closest document that we have for which libertarians largely agree because we wrote it, right? And the way that it works, just bring it simple. Every state chooses who they want to go represent their state. Those people, the delegates, they go to the national convention every 2 years. And if there are changes that need to be made, maybe small, minor grammatical ones, maybe significant ones, maybe removing a blank, maybe adding a blank, that's where it happens from those representatives. So effectively, there is representation here for actual living libertarians today, right? So to me, it just makes sense to go with the LP platform. It's the easiest to point people to, and we kind of wrote it. So let's take a look. What do we got here? My images. Boom. There we go. All right. So starting off, I got 3 images. We're gonna make this simple. We're not gonna try to drag you, because again, you might not be a libertarian. You might not understand this. And if you are a libertarian, you will understand this. And I think it'll still make sense, even though I'm not grabbing everything. So I've only got 3 images that I grabbed. This first one starts off and it says, the following principles form the bedrock of a free and prosperous nation. Libertarians come together every 2 years at our national conventions to refine this presentation of our core principles. Every day, we strive to integrate these precepts in the United States of America to provide liberty and justice for all. Okay, so I think this is great. This is simple, easy to understand. Demonstrate this to our fellow Americans. Think about it like, look, every 2 years, we take a look at our platform and we see, what changes might need to be made. Maybe we made some grammar errors. Maybe the situation is different than it was 2 years ago. And so we need to address something a little bit more thoroughly, or maybe we can remove something. Maybe we got to win and it's no longer relevant. We don't have to put it in there. Right. So there are certain things there are certain reasons why the LP platform might change every 2 years. And then number two here says every day we strive to integrate these precepts into the United States of America to provide liberty and justice for all. I think this is great. Like, we are trying to affect the political and the legal landscape with our platform. Like, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have an impact in society. So I think this lays it out great. Like, what are we doing with this platform? I think libertarians would be they would find it very beneficial if they would start saying, what is the goal here? What am I trying to accomplish in real life? Not what principle do I hold to, not what conflicts, your idea here conflicts with your idea over here. I don't think that should be the basis for our disagreement. Our basis should always be, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? What do we want? Okay. So we move on to the next one. And it says crime and justice 1.7. Government force must be limited to the protection of rights and individuals to life, liberty, and property, and governments must never be permitted to violate these rights. Laws should be limited in their application to violations of the rights of others through force or fraud, or to deliberate actions that place others involuntarily at significant risk of harm. Okay, and we don't have to worry about that last sentence. I was just where it cut off. Okay, so think of it this way. Um, I look at it and I say there are two elements here. Number one, there's a limitation on government force. Number two, there is a limitation on how laws are applied, because it says laws should be limited in their application to violation of the rights of others. Okay, and then it goes on to kind of expand a little bit. And I think these are a good way of looking at when we agree or disagree with the law. We can look at it and say, does this law limit government force? And then specifically, how are we limiting how the law is applied to only protecting rights? Right? Like, so yeah, we might have a law, and you can think of that as the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. Okay? The letter of the law might say, "Hey, you were speeding." And the officer might say, "I'm going to let you go with a warning because I can see your wife's in the back seat, going into labor, and you need to get to the hospital ASAP. Let me get you a police escort." Right? That would be the difference between the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. Hey, you're speeding. You should stop. You should wait for me while I give you a ticket. Right? And and maybe you wouldn't stop, but let's just assume that you did. And so the point here being, I think that really reflects the spirit of the law, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish. What do we want our society to look like? Right. So I think these are some good guiding principles here. Then we get into this next one, free trade and migration 3.4. We support the removal of governmental impediments to free trade. Political freedom and escape from tyranny demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained by government in the crossing of political boundaries. Economic freedom demands the unrestricted movement of human as well as financial capital across national borders. So here, there are also 2 points: political freedom, economic freedom. And again, just like 1.7, I believe that both of these support the goal. Now, you might say, well, what is the goal? And I don't have I don't have a screenshot of it, but the goal, where did I have that note here? I had that note. I skipped over that by accident. I didn't mean to. Let me, I want to make sure I read it correctly. I know I put it down. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I did. Okay, so maybe I didn't write the goal down. But so I'm going to kind of paraphrase a little bit. The goal is to see a world set free in our lifetime. That's what it says in the platform. And then it further points out that the policies are just an ends to that goal. So when I look at a law, the first thing that I'm going to look at is, okay, what is my goal? Well, my goal here is to have a world set free in my lifetime, and I want to do that with the fewest violations of individual freedom. That's my goal. I want to apply it so that we have the fewest violations. And this is the reason why I started with the quote that I did at the beginning of the show, because I don't believe that there is a system that we could implement that would never violate somebody's individual freedom at some time. We are humans. We are imperfect. We will create imperfect systems, period. Therefore, the goal for me when it comes to law is number one, I want to meet the I want to advance the goal, the ultimate goal, which is a world set free. It's a little bit vague, okay? But I want to do it with the fewest violations of individual freedom. And I think that 1.7 and 3.4, crime and justice, free trade and migration, they do exactly that. You limit government force and you put a limit on how the laws are applied. And then we seek to encourage political freedom and or demand and support political freedom and economic freedom. So we'll get into that. And again, I think the issue of applying laws just simply is: does it advance our goal? Does it violate the fewest? Does it have the fewest violations of individual liberty? Because at the end of the day, libertarians will all acknowledge that the individual is at the core of our belief. So we need to be mindful of the violations of individual freedom. How many individuals are we violating? Now, this doesn't mean that it's okay. This is just saying in an imperfect world, we strive for the fewest. And since the fewest has no specific number, you continually strive for that. So as we get the idea being, as we get better and better at it, which is not really happening, but if we were in that world where we were actually getting better at it instead of worse, then we would continually be looking for opportunities to um, to violate even fewer freedoms. So let's put some numbers on that so that makes sense. Assume for a moment that we have a law, any law, and right now the application of a law roughly violates 100 people's individual liberties per year. Now, depending on how you view it, that could be a lot or that could be a little, right? There's any number of ways to parse that out. But let's say that prior to that law, what we were doing to achieve a particular end result was roughly causing 500 people a year to have their individual freedoms violated. Well, we've advanced. We went from 500 to 100. But we don't stop because we're now at 100, because we still have 100. So then we look and we say, all right, what can we do to reduce this even further? And we just continually look. If you want to put a number on it, the end result, the end goal, the aim, the North Star is going to be zero, zero violations of individual freedom. But I don't think that's possible. But that doesn't mean that we don't strive for that. We just continually strive for it to get better and better and better. So with this in mind, we can start discussing some specific applications of the law. And this is where I'm going to address Dave Smith's comments that he made. And now I will say this. There were a lot of critics online, and I think I don't know that I saw a single critic that I was like, yeah, that's a fair criticism or a meaningful one. One of the two. One of the two. It was either not meaningful or it was just absurd. So I'm going to be the objective libertarian here. Now, I like Dave, and I generally find disagreement with him mostly on political strategy. But in this particular case, I actually disagree with his position regarding mass deportations. And since you people can't seem to find someone to effectively debate Dave, I guess Dad has to step in, right? Just kidding. I'm just trying to be funny here on Easter Sunday. Let's watch his video. Let's see what he had to say, and then we're going to talk about it.
Here's an issue that me and Douglas probably both agree on. I support mass deportations. Okay, it's an issue that I've grappled with over the years, but at this point, I do think it's like I think people who entered our country illegally do not have a right to be here. And I think it's completely reasonable for us to say, yeah, listen, you came here illegally, you committed a crime, you don't have a right to be here, you've got to go. Now, that being said, I also understand that that is a policy that comes with, a human cost. There are, first of all, if you're doing mass deportations, it's almost impossible that you're never going to make a mistake and that you'll never get, the wrong person. We can see that already mass deportations aren't happening, and it seems like some mistakes have been made. And then also there's, even when people here are here illegally, there's examples that are kind of heartbreaking. I mean, there's people who are just good people who have families, who have established a life here. Someone who came into this country illegally and has been here for a decade and maybe, has kids or whatever the situation is. There's a real human cost to deport people like that. And even though I support the policy, if I wanted to come and argue for that policy and someone was like, I'm a little uneasy with this because of the human cost associated with it, so I want someone there to give you pushback, I'd completely understand that. I would understand that the onus is on me if I'm advocating for a policy that's going to result in human suffering to some degree.
Okay. So I let it speak because I'm just going to talk about it in full, and I just let him go without interrupting necessarily every few seconds. So let's start off the gate here. Folks, if you're a libertarian, you need to knock off the not a real libertarian nonsense. Okay? None of you are pure in principle and in practice. Most everyone has somewhere that they would fail and probably already has failed. Okay? Everyone. Because you are not a perfect human being. So all you're doing is just saying, okay, well, this imperfection here is worth not being called a real libertarian. But more importantly, it's just not productive. Okay, think about it for a second. Dave Smith says he supports mass deportations, and you're like, oh, you're not a real libertarian. Great. What did you do? What did you solve? What problem did you fix anything? Did you further advance liberty? Was any of one of his followers like, you know what? I never thought it that way. No, none of that. You're just speaking so you can be heard. And that's unproductive and useless. Also, somebody could come along and say, well, the violation that you made somewhere or the principle for which you have a conflicting idea with makes you not a libertarian, right? This is really kind of down to an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind kind of a thing. It's just pointless, and it doesn't advance liberty. So knock it off. The other thing I want to point out on this whole not a real libertarian and why everybody, there are imperfections even within some of our own ideas. So for instance, let me demonstrate this. I believe it was David Friedman, Milton Friedman's son. He used a scenario to illustrate the limitations of the non-aggression principle. That's the idea that aggression towards another person is only valid in self-defense. So I want you to imagine something. And by the way, when we're doing hypotheticals, try to use hypotheticals that people can actually find believable. Like sometimes people will be like, all right, so imagine you're in outer space and an alien shows up. And it's like, okay, one, I can't imagine me being in outer space, let alone coming across an alien. So your whole hypothetical is just silly. So when you're thinking of hypotheticals, think of like a real world situation that someone might actually be in or have heard about somebody else being in. So here's this hypothetical that David Friedman used. He says, imagine you're, and I'm changing it a little bit, I think, because I don't remember his exact scenario, but it's pretty close. So imagine your neighbor goes inside their house. Maybe they're going to the bathroom. Maybe they're downstairs in their basement, whatever. And they happen to leave their shotgun on the porch. Now, while they're inside, across the street, a dog attacks a child. So you have a couple of options here. You can go try to fight the dog yourself. That's probably not going to work out so well. You can call the police and let that poor child just sit there and get eaten. Or you can maybe go grab the gun and go shoot the dog and potentially save the child's life. So in this case, you have aggressed against your neighbor by entering on their property, taking their gun without permission, and then going and using it. Now, sure, they might be glad that you did it at the end of the day. They might say, "Oh man, I'm glad you did that." Like, no, don't wait and ask my permission. But unless you had that permission up front, then you still violated their property, right? So this is an imperfection in the non-aggression principle, because we might actually be faced with a situation where we violate somebody's rights in order to protect somebody else. And this does happen. And these are choices that people have to make. This is why I say this whole nonsense of like, oh, you're not a real libertarian. Yeah, it's pretty egregious in my opinion to support mass deportations. But at the end of the day, it's this in principle, it's the same thing. A violation or a conflict of principles is just that, a violation or a conflict of principles. And unless you can put a number on it, the fact that it applies to more people, I don't think, because the question becomes, when is sufficient number of people to say you're no longer libertarian, right? Like if you, in that particular story, I'm violating one person's property rights. Like assume my neighbor, it lives by themselves. So I'm violating one person's property right to save another person. Um, well, okay, you might say, well, Dave is violating many people's rights. And okay, fine, but many, but how many? Like, at what point is that threshold where we went from, okay, we're not going to call you a we're not going to kick you out of the Libertarian Club, to crossing over and saying, yep, it's time to kick you out of the Libertarian Club. I just don't find it a value add. Like when you start breaking it down, I think at the end of the day, what you're really left with is you just have a personality that you don't like. That's usually, like, if we're going to be honest, I think when we say this person is not a libertarian, most cases we are not being objective. We're not stating some sort of objective fact. We are saying, I don't like this person. That's really what we're saying. So you got to knock it off. I think it's best to skip deciding who is and focus on their argument, because, again, all of us have some imperfection. And I believe that to be much more productive. Now, another thing I want to point out, this clip did not come from a show where he's talking about immigration. He's just making a point. He is actually, in that particular podcast, he was talking. He was doing a rebuttal to Douglas Murray, who wrote an article in the New York Post. And so he's doing a rebuttal on what Murray said about the debate that they had about a week and a half ago or so. And so he just kind of includes this short little bit. And I believe that I captured all of it, right? So there's no missing context that, later somebody can say, hey, yeah, but you didn't point out this, you didn't point out that, right? Like I think I grabbed it in full context. However, I'm going to assume, I'm going to be charitable here because that's what we should be. I'm going to assume I'm basically responding mostly to his criticism and slightly to the two smaller arguments that he put in there. But I'm going to be charitable and assume that he has more thoughts on this matter, because, again, this was a clip that was just an aside comment in a part of a larger dispute with somebody else that really doesn't have anything to do with immigration. Because, like, him and Douglas were not arguing the merits of immigration; they were talking about the Middle East conflict, sort of. They're talking about expertise at first, but then they eventually got around to, talking about the war in Gaza, Israel, and whatnot. So they weren't actually talking about immigration. So I don't think that's the fullness of his argument. But I'm going to address what he did say. So I'll address both of those comments that he made, the 2 points where he said people don't have a right to be here and they broke the law. He made those clear points. So I'm going to address those points and I'll address his conclusion. So first, let me point out, and this is going to make some people angry, but I want you to think of this objectively. If an immigrant, legal or illegal, are guilty of committing a violent crime, well, this isn't going to make people angry. I'll get to that more. But if immigrants are guilty of committing a violent crime, then I believe that they should be deported. Okay? Period. You're here from another country. You commit a violent crime, deported, done, end of story. Like we have no obligation. Like because if we put you in jail, well, why should I have to pay for that? Like you're not even like you came here as a guest, and then if that's the way you're going to behave, then you should be removed. Period. Like if you come to my house and you insult my wife, I will kick you out. I'm not going to be like, all right, you go to the neighbor's house and you stay there for a while. I'm gonna be like, no, just get out, get off my property entirely. You're done. You don't get to come back. So I think what works at an individual level can kind of be a guiding idea for what we do on a larger scale. And that is how our society makes restitution for what it can do to victims. And that's by ensuring that that person is punished, which means you no longer get to be in the United States. And that prevents them from creating further victims. Like, hey, you've made a victim. So now we need to address that. We're going to address that by punishing you by saying, yep, we're taking away this privilege of being here. And I don't like to use the word privilege, but for lack of a better word, we're taking away this privilege of you being here. And we're not going to let you back in because one, you broke our trust. Number two, because our trust is broken, we can't guarantee the safety of the rest of our citizens. Like we started off by assuming that you would come here in good faith and behave, but you didn't. So now you're gone. Number two, I think it's worth noting that because making mistakes will happen, that like it's not a reason to ignore or to discard a law because there will always be mistakes. I don't. I would be willing to bet that if somebody studied it, they could go and look and they could find just randomly grab any law, and they could find where a mistake was made in applying that law. So I don't think we can use that as an argument. And he mentions that that mistakes will be made, and I'm using that more as a counterpoint to people that might disagree with Dave. So I'm just kind of like taking that off the table. I'm saying like, look, I don't think that's a meaningful argument to debate Dave with and say, oh, well, see, you can make mistakes, so therefore we shouldn't do it. Well, yeah, pick a law. We can find probably any law that we could randomly pick where mistakes have already been made, right? And we cannot guarantee that a mistake won't be made with any given law. So I just don't think that it would make sense to use that as a rationale to dispute Dave, right? Because we want to do better than all the people that he's bodied, right? That's the goal here. If we're going to have a debate and we're going to try to influence Dave or people that are listening to Dave, we should have better arguments. So we got to kind of work out the ones that aren't so good. Okay. Um, and so I just wanted to make it very clear before anybody gets on me and they're like, oh, so you want illegal immigrants over here killing people? Like, no, I am perfectly happy to send them packing. And in fact, I will go a step further. I will say if you've committed a violent crime, I am okay with sending you to a third world prison, right? Because like if you've committed a violent crime here, then there's a good chance that you'll commit a violent crime if we send you back. So I have no problem with us saying, like if you came here from Mexico, saying, hey, Mexico, here's a guy that's coming back. You probably should put him in prison because he committed a violent crime. He's embarrassing you. Like that's the kind of person that come over here, and that's what Americans are now going to start associating your country with, your people with. So you probably should throw him in prison. I mean, obviously put him in prison for the actual act of committing the crime, but then adding further adding the embarrassment and saying like, look, if you want Americans to think better of you, right? You have no right to your reputation, but you have influence on it. So if in whether we like to admit it or not, there is Americans do generally have a perspective of other groups of people. I know we're all like, oh, you only think about the individual. Yeah, shut up. We collectivize too. So that's natural human behavior. You do it no matter what. You can say you don't, you do. At some point, you do. And the truth is, a lot of people, when they don't have a lot of access to maybe a lot of immigrants, they will make an assumption based on what they read and hear. And so if they're reading and hearing about violent crimes, then that's going to be what they think about. So I think just getting those taken care of right away. All right, so let's get into his arguments here. He says, like, he says you do not have a right to be here. All right, fine. Where is here? So my wife and I have rental properties. Does Dave mean illegal immigrants don't have a right to rent a home from me? Because I would disagree. It's my home, and I have the right to rent to whomever I wish for any reason I wish. Well, at least in the libertarian context. In the context of the law, not so much. In the context of libertarianism, I have the right to rent to whomever I want for any reason I want. I could say, I'm only renting to Black people. I could also say, again, in the libertarian context, I am only renting to white people, right? Like that's what that means. That's what it means to have full on property rights. I own this home. I can do with it as I please. I can also say I'm not renting anybody. Like I don't hate any particular race. I just hate everybody. I'm a misanthrope, right? Like I could go that far as well. I could say I'm just going to buy houses and hold on to them. There's nothing you can do about it. It's my house. I do what I want. Okay. What if I had a store, a business, any kind? Doesn't matter. Does that mean illegal immigrants don't have the right to work for me or come and shop at my store? Well, it's my store. I have the right to hire and sell to whomever I want, again, for any reason I want within the libertarian context. Also, applicable to current laws. If you have a business, you cannot say, I'm not selling to Black people or white people or whatever, right? Short people, tall people. You can't do that. Although in the libertarian context, you would be able to do that. So here I look at it and I say, the truth is that Dave's position, which says you do not have the right to be here, which I tend to agree with, there is no inherent right to be anywhere specifically, right? Like this is not, you can't say like I have a right to stand on this ground, like because okay. I mean, I guess if it's ground that nobody owns, you can get into that argument. But to keep it more simple, like I don't believe that there is a right to be in a given spot in itself. The right is I, as a property owner, have the right to invite you onto my property. I have the right to do business with you. I have the right to rent to you. So if I have those rights, you have to be able to get to me. You have to be able to be in the United States in order for me to exercise that right. If somebody says nope, you can't, Jose can't be here. Okay, well, great. You've just violated my right to be able to engage in association with Jose. It's a violation of my right. And it's a violation of his as well, because he has the right to say, I have $10. I would like to give DL $10 at his store to buy this item. He has that right. I have that right. And I think every libertarian would agree that you cannot violate that right. If two people want to do business, you cannot stop them. Otherwise, you're violating the rights of two different people. But in this particular case, let's just focus on the citizens, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, well, they like to, and I don't think that Dave's doing this necessarily, but a lot of people will separate and they'll say citizens have these rights or privileges available to them, but not immigrants or not illegal immigrants. And from a libertarian perspective, because again, that's what this show is about. This show is about the libertarian perspective. I think that if we're going to say that we honor the right of somebody to own property and to do business with somebody else on their property, we cannot deny that other person. Otherwise, we are inherently denying the first person, the property owner. So I think that he denies his position, denies my right of association, be it a citizen, an illegal or legal immigrant. Because when it comes down to rights, rights are at the individual level. Rights are not conferred based on a status within a country. You do not have rights because you're a citizen. You do not have rights because you're a legal immigrant. You do not lack rights because you're an illegal immigrant. You have rights because you are a person. And so therefore, citizen, legal, or illegal immigrant don't matter. They're not relevant. Now, then we step on and we say, David said, you committed a crime. Okay, so let's lay out our laws with regard to immigration. There is improper entry, or you might know it as illegal entry. That's a federal misdemeanor. Okay, I'm just telling you what the laws are currently. Then there's unlawful presence. That's a civil violation. That's like jaywalking. You know what a misdemeanor is. Then there's reentry after deportation, which is a felony. So if we deport you and you come back, that is a felony. That's where our current laws are at this point. So for me to say you committed a crime, this really comes down to, do we support the law or not? And in this particular case, let's focus on illegal entry, right? Because unlawful presence is just a civil violation. So that's not a crime, not even by our own laws. And I would hope that libertarians wouldn't say, well, our laws aren't strong enough. We need to make this a crime. Like I think it's fair to say that most libertarians would agree that we have plenty of laws on the books to deal with crime. And we don't need one for unlawful presence. So the fact that it's a civil violation, I think, is already a bit far, but it would be even worse if we tried to say, well, that's a crime. Okay. So let's just focus on improper or illegal entry. Um, Question we have to ask: two questions. Does it advance our goal applying this law? And does it violate the fewest number of individual freedoms? Um, well, it violates individual freedom of non-citizens and citizens by applying that law. And it does that because it doesn't advance our goal of a world set free. Like, I mean, I want you to think about it. Just don't add anything else. We'll address, because I know people they get sidetracked and like, okay, what if Jose comes over here and he starts robbing people all over the place? Okay, those are two separate issues. Right now, what we're talking about is just the pure fact that you came here illegally, improperly. You did not go through a port of entry. You did not come here illegally and then reach out and get asylum and go through that process. Let's just say you are here illegally, 100%. Like you did not identify yourself to the government and say, "Yo, I'm here and I'm ready to be, another American." Like whatever. You didn't do that. That's what we're talking about. Okay. That's the law we're talking about. Because I already addressed the violent criminals. So, like, look, if you're a violent criminal, kick you out. Gone. Bye bye. Bye, Felicia. Right? That kind of a thing. But now we're just talking about just this particular law. All right. Here's the key point. If someone's only crime is not getting permission from the government, then they have violated zero rights of any American. This is what's going to make people angry. Zero rights are violated. I want you to think about this for a second. Crossing a border in itself does not violate a single right of a single American. You have no right to be free from somebody else crossing a border. That is not a right that exists. And if their only crime, again, and we're talking crime in the context of the current law, if their only crime is not getting permission to be here, to come here, not a single right that you have has been violated. You still have the right to free speech. You still have the right to go to work. You still have the right to get married. You still have the right to go shop at stores, which is doing business with other people, freedom of association. You still have all of those rights. You still have the right to be free from aggression because no aggression has been applied to you. Like you have not faced any aggression just on that alone. So I think that when Dave says he talks about human suffering, I think that's the Achilles heel of his argument because mass deportations do not advance our goal, nor does it commit the fewest violations of individual freedom. Right. And I think that the fewest violations of individual freedom is really where that point hits home. Because if nobody's rights have been violated and you remove somebody, then you are removing somebody. Again, remember let's go back to that image real quick. Right here. All right. Nope, it's not that one. It's not this one. Let's go back here. Which one was it? The laws should be limited in their application to violations of the rights of others through force or fraud, or to deliberate actions that place others involuntarily at significant risk of harm. Somebody that has come here and that has not gotten permission to come here does not, they do not violate the rights of another through force, fraud, or deliberate actions that, they're not putting them at significant risk of harm. Not because of that. Now, if they come here and they assault people, they go stabbing, they go on a stabbing spree. Well, number one, now they have violated somebody's rights, probably multiple somebody's rights, probably multiple rights to begin with. Okay. So they've made a violation there. So therefore, we are free to remove them because now we need to apply this law to protect people, protect them, and offer punishment, which I think is a legitimate use of the government, is to punish people when they've made a violation. So I think that removing people that have committed a violent crime, and you can include property crimes too. Like if somebody steals your car and they're an illegal immigrant or they're an immigrant, either one, I'm okay with deporting that person. I do not have a problem because that person has now violated the uh, the rights of the people around them, and the people around them shouldn't have to have their rights further violated by paying for them to be in a prison. Like, think about that. An illegal immigrant comes here. Let's see, steals my car, goes on a driving spree. We get my car back, right? And then if we put him in jail, I'm basically paying for that. I'm paying for the guy that I already had to pay for my car, already had to deal with that nonsense, and now I have to go further and pay for this person to be in prison. No, I shouldn't have to. So I think that deportation under those circumstances is perfectly legitimate. But if they come here and their only crime is being illegal, none of my rights have been violated. So therefore, what right do I have to say, no, you have to leave? Right? Is that really applying the law at a limited basis to a violation of the rights of others? No, it's not. It's not. So I look at it and I say, based on our crime and justice, it's not it. Like, number one, there's the migration issue, which a lot of people they focus on this migration. They'll say like, where is it here? Uh, they'll say crossing of political boundaries should be unreasonably, well, it says unreasonably constrained, but some people will say freedom of movement, right? They'll kind of convert this to what it really is, which is freedom of movement. And they'll say you have the freedom to move about wherever you want. And if you don't agree with this, then you're unprincipled and you're not a real libertarian. I don't find that argument to be very persuasive, not to other libertarians and certainly not to non-libertarians. But I think if we look at it and we say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? What is the goal here? Now, there's multiple goals at play. There's the goal of the Libertarian Party, which we said was to see a world set free in our lifetime. And we use this platform as policies to go toward that goal. And then as that goal as the landscape changes, how we aim for that goal might change as well. So we might say, okay, well, we can remove this element, this plank from the platform because it's no longer relevant. Either we won that fight, or maybe we didn't win it, but maybe the landscape has changed enough. We can remove that and we don't have to focus on it. Right. So again, this is all about what are we trying to accomplish? Then we have our laws. What are we trying to accomplish with the laws? Are we just trying to kick people out, or are we trying to have a society where people come here in good faith and they become productive members of society? If that's our goal, then I think the libertarian perspective of saying we need to limit government. What was that again? Let me go back to that really quickly here. Where did it go here? We need to limit the use of government force. We need to put a limitation on how laws are applied. I think if the goal is, if the general goal of the American population is to say we want productive, good members of society, then they can look at our platform and see, and we should be able to describe how our platform, as it's currently written, will go toward that goal. We're going to limit the use of government force to what we absolutely need. And we're going to limit how we apply laws to only those who are violating the rights of others. And if you're not violating the rights of others, then we're simply going to, we're not going to address it via the law. That doesn't mean you can't address it. It doesn't mean there can't be social norms where people say like, oh, you did this thing. Well, it's not against the law, but that's pretty shady nonetheless, right? So for instance, libertarians generally don't like intellectual property. And so what many libertarians will do is if somebody is stealing, quote unquote, stealing their content, they may fire back at them. They may embarrass them. They may reach out to all their fans and say, hey, don't buy stuff from this person because they're using the stuff that I created and they're not even making a change to it. They just basically took my stuff and they're presenting it as their own. Also, that's an issue of fraud, but let's not get too deep into that. Okay. But you see what I'm getting at here? Like we can look at what we're trying to do with the law. We can apply it in a positive way. And then there are ways where, okay, maybe it's not worthy of a law, but we do have recourse for dealing with it in our society. We could simply create ostracization. We can ostracize people for taking and using somebody else's work, even if it doesn't rise to the level of fraud, right? So we have ways of dealing with a lot of this stuff. Okay, so let's get back to where I was here. Let me scroll back to my notes here real quick. So we're under you committed a crime. Okay, so again, if somebody's only crime is not getting permission from the government, no rights have been violated at that particular point. Crossing a border does not violate a single right of mine or yours. You have no freedom. You have no right to be free from somebody else crossing a border. That's what it boils down to. Now, you might say, okay, well, DL, that sounds a lot like open borders. No, I'm not done yet. I personally believe that a more Ellis Island style approach to immigration is appropriate. And I think it's our best solution. Number one, we've already done it. There's no speculation. You don't have to look and say, what was the outcome of that? Right? We already know what happens. And everybody knows and has heard of some awesome story about somebody's grandpa who came over here, didn't speak English, only had $20 to his name, worked at a bakery or someplace, slept in the back stock room, saved up all his money, eventually found, a wife, got married, bought a home, maybe bought his own business and started his own business, right? Like that's, the American dream of the ideal, the ideal version of an immigrant, right? And there are many stories that are similar to that in some nature, right? They come over here and they work hard. And there are some who come over here and they commit violent crimes, right? And they do things that they shouldn't do. So I think we need to have the doors open unless somebody has committed a violent crime that we know about in their home country or ours. The other reason that I would reject people is if you had a serious communicable disease. But even that, I create a caveat. I say, we can carve out an exception for anybody working with the medical community who will take responsibility for that person's illness in the way they do a regular American. So let's say that you have somebody in, I don't know, Venezuela, and they have a rare disease. And Venezuela doesn't have any of the resources. Their medical community does not have the resources to deal with it. But maybe the Mayo Clinic does. Maybe they've got some doctors that are studying that disease right now. And they're like, look, and it's a communicable one. And they're like, look, we understand enough about the disease that we will take responsibility for this person. So then they bring this person over and they say, we're going to make sure that this disease stays with this person. And then hopefully, with any luck, we'll be able to treat them. Okay, cool. I think that's a fair carve out for the serious communicable disease. So your doors are open again, unless you've committed a violent crime in your home country or ours. And if if you have a serious communicable disease. This, I believe, advances the libertarian goal, right, of creating a world set free, and it commits the fewest violations. It also advances the general American role if that role, or goal, not role, if that goal happens to be, which I think it generally is, we would like people to come over here and be productive members of society. If that's the goal, if that's what we want in America, then I believe that the Ellis Island style fits that the best because mostly because it leads, for libertarians, it commits the fewest violations. But for non-libertarians, it tells people this is what we want. And so long as you're doing it, we're not going to get in your way. We might even help you on some level, right? Not with government, but somebody might say, hey, you know what? I love the fact that people are coming from Mexico. Maybe they've got some Mexican heritage and they might open a business. Maybe they open a Mexican restaurant and they say, I want to hire, immigrants from Mexico because I want my business to explicitly have a Mexican vibe. And we're going to bring in real Mexicans, people that came from Mexico, and they're going to be the wait staff. They're going to be, all the staff that I have in my restaurant. And we're going to make as an authentic experience as possible in our restaurant. That's totally fine in a libertarian world. There is nothing wrong with that, right? Yes, they would be excluding white people and black people and Indians and whomever else, right? But, and that's part of a longer conversation that I could have at another time. But the point being, doing something like that does indeed meet the goal of having the world that you want. And for libertarians, commits the fewest violations. So I think that's this response, I think, for Dave's position of mass deportations, as far as I've heard in that clip. Now, he might have other views that I'm not aware of and that I didn't address. And that's fine because, again, that 1 minute and 30-second clip, it came out of an hour podcast that was actually talking about something that's not really related to immigration. So it was an aside. And I think we need to remember that. Okay, so let me address some counterpoints here. Just a couple big ones that I've seen. Number one, Social Security. A lot of people are like, "Oh man, Social Security! All these illegal immigrants are getting Social Security money." Well, number one, in the libertarian world, nobody gets Social Security because there is no Social Security Administration to take money or government to take money and appropriate it for Social Security use so that it can be given to other people. Like that would not exist in a libertarian world. So nobody should get any of that money. But more importantly, as to the point of Social Security, in episode 47, Lies Government Tells Us, I addressed this 2 million immigrants claim. Elon pushed it. And then like a week or two later, the Social Security Administration account on X, they also started pushing that. Here's the short version. You can go look that up and get the longer version, but the short version is they're discussing the EBE, the Enumeration Beyond Entry program. That program is designed to streamline Social Security numbers to legal immigrants with the assistance of DHS. So, and you can go look at the picture at the bottom. It says source EBE. So they're showing 2 million. And they're like, yeah, 2 million illegal immigrants have gotten Social Security numbers. That doesn't make sense because they showed 2 million and the claim was that they were all illegal. But according at least to the process of the EBE, where they got the numbers, that process requires cooperation from the DHS. So presumably, there are some people that have received Social Security numbers legitimately. Like, let's assume that some people, we can even assume that 2 million got them illegitimately. But the program was designed to give legitimate Social Security numbers to legitimate immigrants. So then what are the numbers for those? But that's not what they showed. They showed a chart, and that chart had 2 million number, and then there was no other numbers. So from my understanding and based on my research, which I went into a little bit more in depth in that episode 487, my takeaway was they're lying. They're not being truthful. They said, here's all the people that got 2 million, 2 million people got Social Security numbers. They're all illegal. Okay, well, that can't possibly be true unless you have another number that shows all the legal immigrants, because that program is literally for the purpose of giving legal immigrants Social Security numbers. So there has to be at least some people that got it legally through the right process. And if they're not going to show that so that we can say, oh, wow, out of 2 million, how many people got one legally? And the numbers kind of don't make sense. Like if you say like 2 million people got it illegally, then how many people would have gotten it legally? Presumably more, right? And so like how did you get so many that got through that system. What's going on? So there's a lot of questions and a lot of problems with that argument. So I dismiss it. The other thing is I don't think people realize this about Social Security numbers. Um, Social Security numbers come in 3 flavors. You can get one that's unrestricted. That's the one that I have, that most every American has, right? You can go to work with that. You can use it for any purpose you want in the United States. Then there are 2 others. There's one that's for work only, like you can't use it for benefits. And then there's one that's not for work. It just it like, and I'm not sure that I know the purpose of it, but they both say it for work purposes only, not for work purposes or something like that. It says it. You can go look it up, right? So there are 3 reasons that somebody might have a social security number. So we need to parse out, okay, well, some illegal immigrants got them. Then number 1, how many legal immigrants got them? And what do the numbers look like on that? Or is it true, which I believe it is, that the 2 million number is the total number of social security numbers that were that were given out, and Elon and the Social Security Administration are now basically lying to people and telling them that they're all illegal immigrants. So I just don't believe it. I don't think the numbers add up. There's more details in that episode. Go check it out. The second big one that I see is to talk about welfare. People say, "Oh, well, we've got welfare to deal with. All these illegal immigrants are taking welfare." And some people like to argue and say, "Oh, well, not that many." Okay, but that's not really a good argument if there are some that are doing it. Like I've seen some people, they'll say like, "Well, more Americans take it than illegal immigrants." And maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But I think honestly, the proper way to look at this is welfare is an entirely separate issue. We should address it separately. Right? It's entirely different, because what is welfare? Welfare is taking from Peter to pay Paul. That's taking from me to give to somebody else. That's immoral. Period. No matter how desperate that person might be, it's immoral to forcibly take it from me and give it to somebody else. That's not charity. That's immorality. Charity would be if I gave my own money on my own cognizance to somebody else. That would be charity. Okay, so it's not charity when the government does it. It's force, because they're literally saying, like, if you don't, like, in theory, I guess, if well, not even in theory, in truth, if you don't pay your taxes, you will go to jail. We will lock you up if you don't give us money so that we can use it how we deem fit, which is always to give to somebody else, right? So that's immoral. But as we've seen, government isn't so good at this whole give and take thing. It's not like they say, okay, well, you allow us to have this and we'll get rid of this. It's not what they do. They take, and then they take some more, and they take some more. For instance, we have Doge. Think about Doge. Doge came out and said, look at all this corruption, all this money that's going places that shouldn't be going. Okay, Americans were like, wow, stop that right now. And then what did Congress do? They signed a bill that basically paid for all that again. That's what they did. They didn't stop. They didn't say, oh, wait, you know what? Let's reduce the tax bill, since we found areas where money doesn't need to be going and we can basically eliminate it. That means we can eliminate the amount of revenue that we're collecting from people. Because if we're no longer spending $100 million here, well, then we don't need to collect $100 million, at least that $100 million, right? Technically more, because if you don't spend that 100 million, then you don't have all the administrative fees that come with spending that 100 million as well. So there's going to be additional benefits there. So, but at least at a minimum, $100 million, like in this scenario, right? So if you find $100 million, give it back to the people by not taking it in the first place. So I think that, and the government has shown that they don't do that. So this idea that we're just going to get rid of immigrants and then we won't be paying for what the government has already determined, this is how much money we need for welfare. If you get rid of the immigrants, whichever ones might be taking it, however much that is, right? And I'm presuming that there is a number. But if you get rid of the people, the government is not just going to be like, oh, check that out. We had a reduction in people claiming welfare benefits. Looks like we don't need that money anymore, and we can just go ahead and stop taxing the American people. They don't do that. They're going to keep taxing that money. So that money is not only taken previously, you might as well consider it taken in the future, unless you address it. And from my perspective, as long as we focus on this idea that, oh, because of welfare, we can't have immigration. We got to fix the immigration before we fix welfare. I think it's a pipe dream. I think that historically, the way the government behaves, our government specifically, has shown that to be false and foolish thinking. I don't think that you have evidence to support that's how things will play out. All you end up getting is deporting people and then potentially have to dealing with them if they come back. By the way, since we're talking about money, I asked Grok, I was like, like if you depending on who you ask, I saw on the low end, like, or somewhere in the middle end from some sources about 12 million illegal immigrants. And then I saw some people online, they're saying like 40 million. So, and I don't have my specific numbers here, but I believe it was, if it was 12 million and you set aside any legal cost, okay? So we're not talking about like, hey, you get a day in court and you get to have the judge's time and the administrative time and all the fees that are associated. Let's just say that we find you and we deport you because you're an illegal immigrant. We just fast track it, right? There are still costs because you got to find them, you got to collect them, you got to transport them, right? You got to do certain things at a minimum to get rid of them. The cost of those, I asked Grok, I said, can you give me a conservative estimate for deporting 12 million and 40 million people? For 12 million, it was like $100 billion, something like that. And it was in the bill. It was in the well over tens of billions of dollars. And to deport 40 million people, I believe it came to like 1.5 trillion or something like that. It was up there. So, and that's disregarding any legal costs. So we're not talking about due process or anything. So now, on top of violating my right to be able to do business with whom I choose, you would be, by deporting these people, you would be forcing me to pay for it. Because even if it was only $500 million, that's 500 million. That's a lot of money, right? That is a lot of money that could be given back to the taxpayers or used for something else. I don't know, a road, since, half the roads suck around here. So you're basically violating my rights multiple times by forcing me to pay for something that you're preventing me from doing. That's not moral. And no libertarian should support that. Because I don't think this is an issue of, oh, my principles. This is an egregious error. This is an egregious violation to tell me who I can and cannot engage with, who I cannot associate with, and then to make me pay for it. Come on. Now, there's more to this whole welfare thing, because not only is there no evidence to support that anything's going to be any easier, right? Like, if you deport them, I just don't think there's any evidence to support that things are going to get better. Okay. But more to the point, if the answer to illegal immigration, if the answer to illegal immigrants getting welfare is deportation, what is the answer for U.S. citizens? I mean, you can't deport them. And libertarians would demand that government treat individuals equally. Well, that's not treating them equally. And we don't have to get into the whole woke and, equality and all that. We can just, at a bare minimum, governments, the libertarian community should hold that government has to treat individuals fairly and equally, right? And so if our rationale, in part, for deportation has anything to do with welfare, then you are not treating people equally. You are not treating individuals equally. You are saying there is a different class of people, one that is citizen, one that is not citizen, and then you break the not citizen into illegal and legal immigrants, for which you would presumably treat them both separately or differently. So now you have 3 different ways of treating people. And I don't think that this fits with the libertarian idea of anything, like, but mostly of in the individual. So I think that when we look at, and these, I can't go into all of them. I'll look at some of the comments here in just a second. but these are some of the biggest ones that I've seen pointed out lately, and I think that they violate the rights of people, and they do not support our goal in any shape or form. They do not support the libertarian goal of a world set free. They do not, by supporting that goal, they do not violate the fewest number of individuals' freedoms. And then if you look at just the non-libertarian goal, the American goal, which would be, hey, we want productive people here in society, I don't think that deporting people necessarily fits that either. You could probably make a small argument if you're a non-libertarian and say, look, as a non-libertarian, I am not boxed into this idea of treating people equally. But once you open that door, then you open the door for yourself in some other way. So, because you basically said it's okay to treat people differently based on some criteria that I'm accepting. So, therefore, somebody else will come along and say, well, you know what? That's a good point. And I think I can violate your rights based on the idea that, number one, not treating people equally has already been considered acceptable. So either it's acceptable or it's not acceptable. If it's acceptable, then you run the risk of your own rights being violated, even if you don't believe in the libertarian argument that I'm putting forward, right? So that's how I see this. And then the final question that I'll end on, and then I'll look at some of the comments here, is a lot of people might say, "What would you do? How would you handle this?" And so I'm going to make it super simple. I'm not going to try to narrow down on every little T that needs to be crossed and every dot that needs to be, every I that needs to be dotted. Very simple. I would go toward an Ellis Island immigration style system. Then what I would do is I would say, whether it's 12 million or 40 million, I would say, number one, we're going to grant amnesty. I know people hate that word. It's like the F word to you guys. But I would say we're going to grant amnesty, but there are some clear criteria on it. Number one, the amnesty is only going to be if you came here illegally. That's it. That's the only amnesty you're getting for. Okay. And that status, because remember, there were three major points to immigration law. Number one, it's a misdemeanor if you come here illegally. Number two, it's a civil violation if you are here unlawfully. That gets addressed if we give amnesty for the first one. And then the third one is if you come back after you've been deported, then that would be that presumably you would accept that being given amnesty as well. And so now we've taken out the two crimes, and then the civil violation is rendered null, because if you're here, if we've given you amnesty and you're now here legally, then you're not here unlawfully. Therefore, you're not creating a civil violation. But I would do this. I would say you get the amnesty if you have not committed a crime here or in your home country. And I would give a caveat, and I would say, and I'm just going to make up a number. We could argue the merits of the specific number, but I would say for the next 10 years, if we find out that you have committed a crime at any time in the United States or your home country, we are revoking your legal status. We will deport you, right? Violent crime. Again, you can add significant property crimes as well. Somebody steals your car, they can be deported. If they shoplift a candy bar, I think we can deal with that through our normal legal process. Okay. Because I'm trying to create the best society possible. I'm trying to minimize the number of violations to individual liberty. That's my goal here. Or if you're just a regular American and you're not a libertarian, I am trying to create a society that has productive people in it. Okay. And so I'm trying to do the least amount of damage. And every time the government has to do something, there is potential damage to somebody. If nothing else, they have to spend resources to do it. So what I want to do is I want to limit the number of resources, which limits the amount of taxes that we have to pay. Okay. So I would grant amnesty to anybody that has not committed a crime. That's going to encourage people to come forward and say, hey, and they can show evidence that they haven't committed any crimes. We can look at we've got databases all over the damn place. We can check those out, right? Who was it? The New York Times. They checked federal databases, state databases, international databases, and I think even specific country databases for the people that were deported to El Salvador recently. So, like, we already have a means to checking people out and saying, like, doing a cursory search. But then we add in this caveat and say, maybe we don't catch it today, but if we catch it tomorrow, if we catch it in the next 10 years, you're gone, right? That gives us time to deal with checking people out, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a real question. Like, how do we deal with this? Well, if you try to deal with it all at once in any way, it's always going to be a huge demand on resources. Dealing with 40 million people, no matter what, is always going to be a lot of resources. Whether you kick them out, whether you grant them amnesty, whether you go case by case by case, doesn't matter. You are going to be utilizing resources. Where do they come from? Your fellow Americans. How do we minimize that? Or at least how do we stretch it out so that we have the least impact possible? Okay? Because again, everything here is about creating a better society. So that's my criteria. If you have been if we know that you have committed a crime, a violent crime, or a significant property crime in this country or in your own country, we find out that your name's in a database somewhere, you get kicked out. And I'm willing to say you don't get to come back. I'm cool with that. I have no problem. So now we can spend the resources focusing on those people that would make our society that much worse. We also allow ourselves plenty of time to work out 12 or 40 million or some number in between over time, rather than trying to deal with this all at once. I think that also deals with the human impact that Dave was talking about, the human cost. There will be a human cost to kicking people out. And at the end of the day, everybody, libertarian or not, needs to come to terms and say, is it really that I want somebody kicked out who came over here illegally? That's their only crime, which again, did not violate anybody's rights. But once they got here, established a life, raised some kids, go to work, pay taxes, presumably, or would pay taxes if they were doing it, working through a legal means, right? Is that the kind of society that I really want? Or is that the kind of person that I actually do want? I mean, think about it for a second. If their only crime is coming here illegally, what are you bitching about? If they've otherwise shown you that they've been here and they're able to be the kind of neighbor that you say you want, why are you bitching? Why are you complaining? Is it just because they're brown? I would hope not. I hate that argument. I use it sometimes just to make a point, but I hope that would not be the argument. I hope that you're not so rigid in the law that you want it applied without even considering what is the purpose of the law? What are we trying to accomplish with the law? Are we trying to accomplish, like, hey, every time you get busted, you get the book thrown at you, end of story? No American wants that. How many Americans get pulled over on a regular basis and they immediately say, can you just let me off with a warning, officer? Like, everybody. How many Americans have been pulled over, got a warning, and handed it back? Where's the paper? Handed it back and said, I'm sorry, officer. The law is the law. You need to write me a ticket. You can't be giving me any favor because, you're in a good mood today or because I had a good excuse. No, you need to write me a ticket. No American says that because that's not really the society they actually want. They don't want a society where we're holding the law above people's heads without any kind of mercy. That's not what you want. So start acting like it. Act like you want a society that has a little bit of mercy and says, all right, you didn't violate anybody's rights. Let's get this cleaned up. Let's get you out in the open and moving on. And then if we find out that you have committed a crime before this moment or after this moment, then we're going to kick you out. And you're legal for, let's just say, 10 years. And after 10 years, you can't, because we're granting you amnesty. After 10 years, when we feel that sufficient time has passed to find out whether or not, and even investigate that you've committed a crime, after 10 years, we're going to go ahead and say statute of limitations. We're done. You can start the process now to becoming an American citizen. I think this approach satisfies everything that we say we want, all of our principles. It takes libertarians in the direction of a world set free in their lifetime, and it causes the minimum amount of violations because we live in an imperfect world and we cannot, under any circumstances, guarantee that somebody's rights won't be violated by the laws that we create, because we are humans who are imperfect. We are therefore going to create imperfect things. That's my response to Dave and to anybody else that holds his position. Let's take on some comments. See what we got here. Joe says cancel DL. Maybe that might need to happen, and if it does, that's fine too. Let's see what else here. And I'm trying to I try not to miss any. So like, if there's yesterday I missed a I missed a Rumble rant, and I apologize for that. Let's see. It's an interesting point here. After due process, the quest is, what is the minimum level of process due? I agree, and we can have that argument. I think it's the minimum amount is the amount that gives you the maximum opportunity to challenge accusations. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what due process is, from the perspective of a government and an individual, is the government has made an allegation. They have accused you of something, and you have the right as a person to challenge that accusation. And I know people don't like that when it comes to illegal immigrants. A lot of them say, "Oh, you don't get due process for U.S. citizens." But then we go back further and we say, "Well, how do we know they're not a U.S. citizen?" Like if somebody says you're an illegal immigrant, they need to be able to prove, or not prove, but they need to be able to challenge that accusation and say, "No, I am a legal immigrant, or I am a U.S. citizen," right? And then we also have laws existing that allow them to, somebody to come here illegally, and you have 1 year from the time that you come here illegally to apply for asylum. Okay, well, that's on the books. So either we're a country that believes in the rule of law, or we don't. And so if you believe in the rule of law, that is part of the rule of law, which means that even if you come here illegally, you can request and say, "Hey, government, I came here illegally, but now I'm here and I want to tell you that I would like to apply, I would like to qualify under this part of the law." Okay, that's part of due process. And anytime the government has new charges, new accusations, you have the right to challenge them, and you should be able to challenge them to the point where you exhaust all challenges. Okay, especially like in this particular case with the what's going on now, especially when we're sending people to third world prisons. So that's my short version of due process. Let's see what else. This is a good one. But they're military age brown men. Okay, so we'll set aside the brown men part and we'll just say military age. I have seen this one a few times. People are like, "Oh, we're under invasion by military age men." So let's just briefly take the Abrego Garcia case. He's technically a military age man. He was technically sort of when he came here at the age of 16 in 1995, I think. So he's been here for like 14 years. No, it was not 1995. 2011? Yeah, I think it was 2011. 2011. So he's been here about 14 years. And for 14 years, he has done nothing militarily that we can identify. He has not made any attempt to say, "Let's overthrow the government." He has not committed any violent crimes. He has not committed any he's not been convicted. Let's put it that way. He's not been convicted of any violent crimes. Let's say that. There is some arguments about whether or not he was a domestic abuser, but he's not been convicted of any violent crimes. The U.S. government has not accused him of any violent crimes. So, and he's been here for 14 years. He's got hitched. He got hitched to a woman that has like 2 kids, and then they had a kid of their own, or maybe 2 of their own. So it seems like he's starting a family. All I'm saying is the whole military age men falls apart when you see that somebody's been here for decades, or a decade or longer, and they're literally living in the same way that everyday average Americans are. Going to work, getting paid, getting a YouTube subscription or a Hulu subscription, right? finding love, having kids. That's not really what I would consider to be an invasion. I mean, unless you're talking like long-term invasion, like, man, these people are playing for 50 years from now. They're going to invade our country, turn us all brown, and bam, we're all gone. Okay, well, that's not invasion by any stretch of the imagination. Invasion is a little bit more on the immediate side, and there's hostilities involved, right? Like that's how we know it's an invasion. So I disagree with that notion. Let's see. Let's see here. That says you missed the context of Dave preferring electing Republicans to Libertarians. Not really. I actually addressed that in the very beginning. I said him and I disagree quite a bit when it comes to strategy. So I didn't address that specifically because I don't believe that's relevant in the conversation on should libertarians support mass deportation or not. Like whether or not you tend to favor electing Republicans over libertarians, not relevant here. And that's in my mind, that qualifies as a strategic argument because at the end of the day, Dave is still looking for libertarian policies. So I'll give him that. Let's see. Get the government out of it. Yes, I agree. We should get the government out as much as possible. What I like to tell people when they say, what's a libertarian? And I say, okay, well, you know how people are for small government? And they're like, yeah, I totally get that. All right. Imagine that government is a beach ball. And I said, okay. And I'm like, you know how big beach ball. And I said, libertarians want a government that's like the size of a marble or less. So, and then people kind of like, oh, okay, you're really small government. So now I've set the stage for any argument that I make about getting rid of government. Shouldn't come as a surprise because I'm literally wanting to go from a beach ball to a marble. So let's see what else we got here. Live math, never good. I know, right? I try to never do live math. Always bad. All right, folks, I'm going to get out of here. I hope that satisfied. Maybe Dave will watch the show, and if he's got some more thoughts and he wants to combat them, that's fine. If other people do, that's fine too. If not, that's fine as well. But I've made my position. I think that mass deportation does not qualify under any reasonable argument to be made for the libertarians, and that ultimately it boils down to what kind of society are you actually trying to build? And does deporting people on a mass basis accomplish that? And does it violate the fewest civil liberties? I believe it does not. Or violate the fewest rights? I believe that it does not. So with that said, let's get out of here. Enjoy your Easter. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.